Tony, thanks so much for joining me. I promised you tea here in the park. I'm so sorry, but you know what? I've actually had one too many teas, and it's such a warm day. Financial services is an unrelenting business. It's hard, it's time consuming, and no matter how much work you do, it just never seems to be enough. At the same time, financial institutions are having to rebuild trust with society at large. There's lots more regulation, and that puts a lot more pressure on financial services firms. We're also having to deal with this ongoing onslaught of technology, some of it disruptive. We have all these fintech upstarts that are constantly challenging business or service delivery models. And then ultimately, we're in a super competitive market. I think the one thread that all successful financial services firms need to hardwire into their DNA is agility. This is a bit of an open-ended question, but how agile are financial services firms here in the US?
I think you have to be pretty agile because it all boils down to what kind of data you're feeding from one system to another. And mapping is the key. If your mapping is done correctly from the outset, then the data that's transmitted from one system to another will be, 100% correct, or as correct as you can possibly ask for. There are systems where the mapping just doesn't work between two systems, so what we do in our world is we just try and get it as close as possible to what we need it to be. One of my favorite statements has always been, garbage in, garbage out. So the system is only going to be as good as what you feed it. So you need to make sure that your mapping from the outset is as good as possible.
So am I hearing you correctly? There are many layers in putting together an enterprise architecture, systems, processes, technology. But where you've gone to instinctively is you've said it's the data architecture that and I don't want to be putting words in your mouth, but it's the data architecture that almost sits at the pinnacle of driving the enterprise architecture.
Yes, it is, because the data is the most important thing. The data is what drives everything. Your account accuracy, your trading accuracy. You need to have your data needs to be correct, no matter what it is, whether it's securities for Security Master, the information that you pull in from whether it's a Bloomberg or interactive financial data. The data is what drives everything. So to me, that's one of the, if not the most important aspect of any system, any technology.
So what makes then for good data management?
You have to choose the right systems. You have to, again, like I said, you have to make sure your mapping is crucial from the onset. And then
let me interrupt you there. You've made this comment a few times now, mapping. But let's just take a step back for a minute. If we look at the typical financial institution, many of them either have lots of legacy. These are systems that have evolved over long periods of time, or they've grown up through merger and acquisition. So there tends to be perhaps multiple versions of the same thing, or there's lots of spaghetti and bolt-on. You've said mapping, but how do you map in that very heterogeneous, in that very complex world?
Well, what you have to do is you have to know what the coding is on whether the legacy system is and how it translates through their system. And then the system that you're bringing it into, you need to know what your coding is for that type of transaction or security. And you have to make sure you're mapping from the legacy to the system you're using. It's not going to be the same, but you have to make sure that this transaction code maps to this transaction code on your system. And a lot of times we'll find, just like you said, all these different legacy systems and all these mergers and acquisitions, we'll find that we have on our system, we have a transaction code, and we may have 3 or 4 different transaction codes coming in from the other side. We need to make sure that when they come over, they all map to that one transaction code. So it's not just as simple as a one-on-one. You have to know on the system you're bringing the data from what all the codes relate to, so you can map it to the right code on your system.
So are you saying that somewhere at a macro level, if a financial institution wants to be agile, it needs to be focusing and building a core competence around data management, but it sounds to me that what's going to drive the mapping is having some sort of data dictionary.
Correct.
So how does that work?
Well, most systems have a data dictionary to begin with, and from the onset, you would definitely need to know what your business is, what kind of transactions you're going to be processing, and you have to come up with your data dictionary. And then you need to map everything else into that dictionary. So, for example, when you're trading, we deal with other systems, and for a buy transaction, some systems it's just a B, some systems the code is a BY or BOY. So whatever it is on that other system, you've determined on your side what you want that code to be, because you're using that code on your system to go across other functions within, how it's going to treat cash, how it's going to treat positions. So you've come up with your own data dictionary and your own coding, so to know how it's going to work in your system. Now you need to take those other codes and map them to your code.
And I guess the problem gets exacerbated further when you realize you're also pulling in all sorts of other third-party feeds as well. So it's not just within your own enterprise.
Right. But on your system, what your coding does to various types of transactions, reports. So you need to have that all worked out from your side first, because nobody knows better about your system than you do. Hopefully.
I was going to say, you hope that's the case, Tony.
Yes. So having all that done, then you need to be able to, because you need to go into the data dictionary on the other systems also to see how their coding works for their system. So you're pulling in the right code, because they may have similar codes, say accrued interest as opposed to a coupon payment. So you need to know exactly what their coding is doing so you can map it correctly to your coding.
If we perhaps take on the point that you've made about mapping and the challenges there, what do you think are the sort of key 3 to 5 priorities that banks, operations directors should be focusing on? Are there any best practices that have emerged over time?
Well, the best thing I believe is you should have some type of control reports, ways that you can, within your own system, manage the data. As an example, security pricing. Security pricing drives market value, AUM, so you need to be sure that your pricing service is coming across with good prices, you're supplying accurate values to your client. So we have installed what we call control reports that will tell us if an asset didn't get priced last night, or the price is a couple of days old. Price variance, which will compare last night's close to the night before's close. And I believe we use 7% as a key to see if the price is more than 7% difference, then somebody looks at that data to say, there could be legitimate reasons for the stale pricing, the no pricing, or the variance, but we should have somebody verifying this data. Just because you have this data coming in from outside services, you shouldn't just assume that it's always going to be 100% correct. We also have checks and balances. So if our managers or traders try and trade a security in an account, say they want to sell 500 shares of Apple, and the client only owns 300 shares. So the system validation will kick that out and tell them, you don't have enough. So you need to have, you need control reports, you need the system to have some validation checks within it, and you need the human touch also, because a lot of times you need to research. Just having these things kick out and say that, yeah, this is wrong, or you need to have someone physically go in and check it out, because like I was saying with the security pricing as an example, we do get these validation kickouts, and a lot of times we'll check it and it's correct. For some reason, bond didn't price last night, so it's a stale price, or a common stock just went into default, so it didn't price last night. So you need to have system validation, and you need to have the human touch also.
So data, I guess, is a 4-letter word.
Yes.
It's messy, it's hard, it's difficult, but I guess ultimately it's one of the key pillars and one of the key sources of competitive differentiation in the marketplace.
Absolutely. And I always go back to what I've been saying for years. I don't want to say how many years I've been doing this, but since the beginning. I've dealt with a lot of systems over the years, and no matter how good the system is and no matter how big the firm is, it always comes down to garbage in, garbage out. That's what it all boils down to. Simple, straight to the point.
Tony, thank you for your time.
Oh, you're welcome.